In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. Moya light, Moya bright. Welcome to another episode of Moya Political Series. As you've noticed, now we're starting to bridge the gap between spirituality and politics, because this whole thing is one thing. So now we are giving you lectures on how we're going to develop ourselves, on how we're going to pass this information from the youth, from the elders to the youth. And today's topic was speaking about the systems and racism, and what we mean when we talk about the system, and who's woke, who's not woke, and why is it so hard for people to access the economy and things like that. So I've got Gogo Stella Tsautse, who's going to break everything down for us and help us understand ourselves. Mwalo Gogo, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Enkosi for the invite.
So, as we were saying, when people talk about the system, what is the system?
For me, with my own side reading, we have two systems. Initially, Arabs enslaved Africans, and we hardly ever speak about that. It's under the carpet, never ever in the books, as much as the white supremacy. So over the years, there's a dilution in the initial initiators of race hate. It started with Arabs, then it was amplified by the white supremacy and the transatlantic slave. Before we get colonization, before we get apartheid, everything feeds off from the first Arab slave trade that destroyed black families. By the time we get to South Africa colonization, the destruction has already happened in centuries. So we are working with systems that are intending, and by design, to oppress the black mind from thinking like a black person. So the systems are producing Africans who don't see themselves as Africans, who cannot look at an African problem with an African mindset, because the education we are receiving is not geared for our own mental liberation. It's an education that is meant to indoctrinate us to maintain the systems of oppression and live peacefully, happily, with chains that are invisible.
So, I still want us to break it down, because, it's the system. I can't do this because of the system. And I'm hearing you say that there's a system of slavery that started from the Arab times. And the thing is that we are young. So we actually don't even know what you're talking about, So I think, can you help us unpack and go through the journey so that we understand how we got to where we are now?
Okay. The very first slave trade back in antiquity days, Africans in Africa, life was thriving. The first civilizations, long before we look at Kemet as the hype or the top tier of civilizations. Inzalelanga becomes the initial unspoken about as part of the civilization going up to Kemet. We don't even know that history, that if in the early days of Inzalelanga, there were Anunnakis or Africans, because in a white man, if something can't be explained, it's given to the Anunnakis. There's an existence, there's a possibility they're there, probabilities are high that they existed. We have the Dogon people, so it becomes, we can link Anunnakis to that existence of the Dogon people. There's a higher probability that there were Anunnakis and there's an existence of them. So when you look at Kemet, before Kemet fell, the true destroyers of Kemet were Arabs, before the whites came. And we don't look at the effects, the traumas that started from the Arab slave trade, where today you have African people walking around with titles as Muslims. How we don't question that, how come you're black and you're not identifying as an African? What happened to your Africanness? Why are you so easy and not willing to even understand what happened to your ancestors? And the mindset is, it happened a long time ago, forget about it. Forgetting is harming the black mind and going forward and the black unity that we all speak about. So if we can't go straight to the core of how did a person end up being a Muhammad? How come in 2024 you are at peace being a Muhammad and you're black? You kinky hair and you're walking around with an Arab slave name, and you pass it on to your kids. It's a continuation. Then we move on to the transatlantic slave trade, where Africans were taken from Africa to the Americans, to Britain, built wealth, free of charge, zero repatriation, and we're supposed to be forgetting about all of those things. We can't look at an African problem from the initiating time, that these are brought forward problems accumulating over the many centuries and unaddressed. So our education doesn't teach us to go back, fix ourselves, free our ancestors who passed in slavery, in bondage, return them to Imsamu, Yasemakaya. The education that we're receiving doesn't speak about all of those things as, for me to be a whole being, I must be restored to the ways of my ancestors before they encountered the Arabs and the white people.
How are we going to restore that? Because, I mean, that sounds like quite a...
You start small, start unlearning, start reading. You put yourself to school. It's a calling to awaken. It's a calling to unlearn. It's a calling that government should be spearheading at. What are we feeding our kids from an early age? The television we're watching. Everything that we are watching is not intending for our mental liberation. So you start small with education. Parents teaching their kids that walking around with calling yourself a Christian, calling yourself a Muslim, you are giving your enslavers power by those words.
Yeah, the thing is that so many people are Christian, and in fact they think that Isintu is like demon worship, and that is the majority.
The point of the two systems were to have your first tier of your protectors looking like the people who are revolting against the systems. So the two systems have perfected the art of ensuring that you have staunch Christians, black, who will protect Christianity, who will never ever read anything outside the Bible, who are committed to never understanding themselves, because with Christianity, the Bible is here, your ancestors and your spiritual gifts reside within you. You always be external. You will never go inward and say, who am I? In my blackness of blackness, how did I end up having an identity that is not aligned with my spirituality? And they look at spirituality as demonic, because if the intentions of system are, we will indoctrinate you to a point where you think like us. You look at yourself and you don't feel good being black and venerating your ancestors. You are no longer human enough at a spiritual level because you don't love yourself. And for Africans, the majority that look at us, abantu bedlozi, abantu bomoya, as backward, uneducated, it hurts that you cannot connect with yourself. You are using the language of your oppressors to demonize me for returning to my source. And it's a paradox that you know the truth of Christianity, how did it happen? You know of how Islam destroyed the black race, and today you can freely embrace titles given to you by your oppressor. That is a mad sum that it doesn't make sense that you're okay with walking around with, I'm Christian. How did you become Christian? It's not important anymore. So you've embraced forgetting. You've embraced suffocating your own trauma. You've embraced it all that I will distance myself from my race. And you become a perpetual whatever they feel that you can become.
But isn't it easier?
To forget? To live with no memory?
Because everything has already been set up. and there's churches at every corner, and the schools teach you how to be a Christian, so it's easier to
embrace and forget.
Even when you go to guest houses, there's a Bible there next to the,
I put it in the drawer. You put it in a drawer. It can't be hard. Put it in a drawer. Walk around with Malcolm X. Replace the Bible with Malcolm X. He will fire you to understand why your mind is the way that it is.
Because I think that a lot of people, it's the work. They're like, where do we find this information? And they don't understand why we think the way we do and how we came to thinking the way we do.
Unlearning is a calling, I like to believe. And those who are called to unlearn are called to teach. And the biggest hurdles will become, you can be educated, and still embrace everything that is the truth. How did white people end up in South Africa or in Africa? How did Arabs end up in Africa? Can we start with the truth? And if you cannot go to the truth, you need to ask yourself, what happened to my relationship with the truth? Because the truth is the only truth. There's no other variation. There were oppressive systems that brought people left their homes in London. My grandparents are Caucasians as well. So I'm of mixed race. So they left London in 1820, came to South Africa, to Cape Town, landed in Cape Town. John Donne's descendant, came to Natal, married one of my great-grandmothers, and I'm here today because of that.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
So now, because I want us to keep getting to the systems, because that's what socializes us.
Yes.
And that's what is all around us. So how do we unpack this thing? Even now you're looking at the political parties and...
At a political party, if a political party cannot see a black child as this is me, in the next 18 years, when this child finishes high school, where will this child fit in? Will they be going to school at university? If they go to university, what is going to happen to this black child from age 3 if you go to a prep and you go you go all the way to a private school? I'm producing a black child who's going to have a different way of looking at life. But if the parent is Stella, raising her kids with Malcolm X, with Steve Biko, with Sobukwe, I have a lot of ink. So my ink is all about conversations. Like, who are the people in your arms? How come you felt the need to engrave them? This becomes a conversation that with these men and women that are engraved, they ground me, they remind me who I am. Even if I can have a master's degree, they benchmark my mindset. You can have all the education if your core spiritual or academic is coming from the West. You will not be able to fit in with a discourse of decolonization. Decolonization starts with, I have been educated in a Western way.
Yeah.
All the books don't speak the truth. They don't tell me about myself. They don't tell me how I ended up being of mixed race. They don't tell me how being a woman in a patriarchal society works. They don't explain anything about life. I must just take what I'm taught, don't question, move on with life as if I'm Shrek, having a good day with Fiona. Doesn't work like that. You unlearn, you question, you get curious that how come black people in a country of South Africa, we have the highest unemployment and it's more on the black side. Those things are structural, they are by design. So you get to be curious that how come a black person is walking to work, a white person has a car, how come the weight and the load of oppression is on the black man? What happened to the black man? Then you ask, but the black government is in power. How come 30 years in, you still have the highest unemployment, you still have the highest class size, you still have the longest queues at Home Affairs, at the traffic departments, you have inefficiencies. What happened to the people who are meant to be efficient? What happened to the black mind that built pyramids? What happened to the black mind that aligned the pyramid to the stars and understood the cycling of the sun and the moon? What happened? What happened to the intelligence? How come black people today cannot think like the Asians? Cannot be inquisitive to understand, how did we get so dumb? Who reduced us to a point where we're slaves and we're begging? And it all goes back to the oppression systems. The education we are getting, the religion that people believe is a way to spirituality and to God, there's no God in spirituality. There's a created man who has been proven to have never existed. And the more you tell Christians that, guys, there has never been Jesus. There has never been Abraham. There are books, and they refuse to read because they feel that you're crazy. So it's an unlearning that requires honesty of self. And
but that's a lot. I mean, if I am a Christian, you tell me that I don't believe in that Jesus doesn't exist.
it's a proven fact. There are books to prove it. There are doctors, there are researchers, African researchers. If a person cannot have a minute to say to themselves, who were my ancestors? If the religion is 2,000 years old, the world has been orbiting longer than that. How come a start of my spirituality or identity dies 200 years later? Who existed before? If I cannot be curious enough to say, from the unknown times to when Jesus came on the world map,
2,000 years ago,
what was happening before? And why am I not keen on understanding what happened before? And that's where you need to be focusing, the before, to understand from the 2000 to now, what has happened to the black mind, what has happened when you are fed indoctrinated education where you must be a system maintainer. If you want to destroy the system, you are given names, you are a revolutionary, you are a rebel, you antichrist, you are everything that is meant to never have been your thing, your own definitions. How come you're at peace with embracing words that are not pro your being? Why demonize when you can embrace and be different? My differences of being black cannot harm you as a Muslim person or as a white person. Why do I need to leave my blackness to be accepted in a system of oppression? So when Africans cannot ask themselves these questions as an individual self, that's where the problem is. As a black person, why are you not keen on understanding the history of your people?
So you made an interesting point earlier on about going to these white schools. So in the 90s, the white schools started opening up for black people. And those black people are now grown-ups.
My age group.
Yes.
Parents to you, parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not as young as I look, but yes.
Parents to you.
I'm that generation, actually.
You are 10 years younger or 15 years younger.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I was born in 1980, by the way.
Okay.
So, there is a certain type of black person that is created by these schools.
A black person who doesn't think black.
Yes.
A black person who doesn't identify with black struggle.
Yes.
A black person who's removed from all things black. A black person who can't be of service to other black people. A black person who's going to call black people outdated, keep up with the times. A black person doesn't see themselves as black. So if that is the product of the kids the system produced, we become the anomalies who didn't absorb the poison of discarding our blackness. So you can be in a system, you can be educated in the system and still uphold your blackness.
I find that they find it difficult to do that. It's easier to hang on to your privilege than to look back at the masses who are struggling. So everyone is just, as long as they sort it out and their family sort it out, like the revolution can...
The system, white supremacy, is based on individualism. As long as I'm fine. We don't come from I'm fine societies. We come from, for me to be I, you need to be well as well. If I can be well on my own without you, I'm no longer part of the system. Ubuntu demands that for me to be happy, your happiness must be as equal to mine. Your care, yourself, all your well-being resides with me. If I cannot have the same beliefs about you, I'm no longer of service to the globe. or nature or the universe. If my existence needs to be when you're on your knees, something is not right there. Our psyches or our spirits or our souls are no longer anchored on Ubuntu. So if a black person is individualistic, the system has perfected its design of making you an alien amongst your own.
But then is this not going to keep perpetuating it? Because like we say now, we have given birth to children who are going to the same schools now. And they also
the parents
more diluted than even us.
It's the parents. I can take you to Saints. When you come home, know who you are. Amongst your friends, know who you are. You are a black child in a white school. You are in a school. There's nothing else. You are just going there to get education. You need to tell me what are the systems in place that can help township schools? How do we, like Panyaz, I'm thankful that during his tenure, he was able to do the application system, stop the long queues, increase efficiencies. What can you learn from white systems that can benefit? That is the point of going to those environments for me.
Exactly.
Nothing beyond that. Go there, teach, learn how different are the systems, go back home and fetch and say improve.
I think that's what the point that was missed is that instead of extracting and coming to build our communities,
we keep continuing not giving back.
With the whites,
Yes, it's like the class size issue. We shouldn't be having a black child. In South Africa, we have the highest illiteracy rate. We have graduates who are unemployed.
Yeah.
The government should be easily, completely able to say, class sizes are producing dropouts. They're producing a jail population. We have unemployment, graduates who can go and teach. If they say in standard 2, grade 4 now.
Yeah.
Yes, grade 4 now. A black child can't read. And you have a graduate who's at home who could be teaching. We're not maximizing our opportunities. We don't have a SWOT analysis to say for each problem there's an opportunity.
We're waiting to be employed.
We're waiting for a savior, and it comes from the Christianity mindset that someone else is going to come and save us. There's never been a savior. There's no savior coming. If we can't save ourselves from everything we've been seeing and learning and comparing and studying, what is the point of us being educated? Our education should be of service to make sure that the next generation doesn't go through what we went through. So we are not plowing back, or the systems are not preventing black-minded people to be of service to the masses. Because a pro-black person who is speaking about empowering black people and not speaking about the whole, that everybody lives in South Africa must benefit. People have been benefiting. We are at peace with that, not at peace. Can we focus on the masses? Can we get the masses to be the same functioning at the ability of academia as the others?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even, when we look at the system, the economy and unemployment, and how you see us now fighting amongst each other with other Africans, when actually the real problem
is government. Government is the main reason for xenophobia. Government issues licenses to private sector. If a private sector company can employ non-South Africans, and South Africans are in the unemployment states, it's a government problem. You cannot have a domestic native unemployed and you have a continental native employed. It doesn't work. It's not xenophobic to place the interest of a domestic native with all the qualifications to be in that job in the private sector. So anyone who's anti-continental natives is not understanding that it's the government. Government is the creator of xenophobia for opening the borders, for issuing a license to companies where they don't employ South African blacks. It's never the individuals from those countries. And it's not xenophobic to say, I will not employ a continental native over a domestic native. That domestic native has kids to feed, has their own lives to care for. And I cannot have that happen in South Africa.
Yeah.
It's never going to be xenophobia in that way. Only if it's a scarce skill that is not available in South Africa. And it's been proven that no one in South Africa has whatever degree, and it becomes an opportunity to educate that in the next 5 years at university, we must be producing children with the following skill sets. And we phase it out, the rare skill. Within 5 years, you capacitate people to have the same skill, the person can go back home.
Because I think that's the violence in the energy behind Chidima. Huh? It's about bread and butter.
Yes.
And the fact that the internationals are taking food from the table of locals.
Domestic, yes. For me, if we were to look at unemployment of our domestic natives and we look at the tenders, why can't government say, for the next years, no more, the following services will be done by everybody at locations. Refuse removal, employ from the locations. South Africans ID first. Any services, maintenance to be done don't issue out tenders. Employ people at all the locations to do the maintenance of their own locations.
Yes.
Piping, electricity, water, train them to care for their environments. Don't have locations that are dirty. You employ them to care for their own environments and pay them. Mothers making uniforms. We have a lot of black women who could be working from home, ensuring that when the child comes back from school, there is a parent available. There's so much that can be improved in South Africa with a black conscious mindset of leadership. Someone who has gone through the schools and also educated themselves to look at life from, this shouldn't be happening. Black people should not be starving in a country like South Africa. We're not nationalizing, one. Without nationalizing, poverty will become a problem. At the same time, balancing poverty with the grandkids. I'm anti the child grant with all my heart. You cannot have a school child pregnant. You cannot have kids having 4 kids by the age of 25. You're loading additional ancestral debts. The kids don't have imbeleko, they don't have the rites of passages. You keep creating more problems for a black child, and you are a black government. And at a blackness, you know that it's hard being black with all the existing problems, unemployment, housing, illnesses, there's AIDS orphans, alcohol. You keep bringing them closer to their homes, and you're complaining about the drug usage, the addiction. Before 94, in locations, I'm older, we didn't have majority of the problems we are having 30 years later. Life, I'm not saying life was easier in apartheid, but we had a collective, we had more unity amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
Post-94, they started breaking. With the black middle class, started seeing that not everybody's intentions being the struggle was meant for the liberating of the masses. When I became better, I will move and forget. The move and forget has broken the black family further because you now have the richer uncles, the richer aunts. They can't go back to their locations because they forget their roots. So pre-94, collective blacks understood that we were united. We had strength in numbers of, we knew who was our enemy, we knew what was required. Post-94, the Rainbow Nation, the born frees, all lies, all complete lies. You can't be born free when your parents were in slavery, when they were oppressed. You become a credit forward of them. Whatever they went through, you become a continuation of that. If there was trauma, it continues. If there was poverty, it continues. We are accumulating problems and not solving. And we keep reporting on the stats, which I'm not understanding that. You report on crime. What are the root causes of crime? At the core of crime, what happened to a black child who is a Ginza? What happened to a black child who is a para? 94, we didn't have drugs. We had marijuana, but marijuana is not a drug. It's the healthiest herb on earth.
Tell them.
It's a herb, as Bob Marley said, and it's healthy, and it should be used.
Yes.
Plenty uses for the herb.
So then what's wrong with our government then?
For me, my own analysis, the ANC was never formed by black conscious, pan-Africanist, spiritual people. Already, they were schooled at missionary schools. You come out believing that, wearing a suit, speaking in an accent, projecting yourself better than your father. You start seeing yourself different to your father. You start separating yourself from the views of your father and your parents and your family and your surrounding. That's where the problem started. You take me to a different school, you feed me with, it's better to speak and posture myself. My mindset. There is nothing wrong with education. Are you being miseducated or indoctrinated, or is it freeing you? So in the education of a black man, that is where the problem happened with the ANC. I would think the next 65, pre-Mandela and his group, they understood the assignment, but they were still on the integration. And I feel that they failed in understanding Malcolm X. They were more on the MLK, never on the Malcolm X, that integration, you can't integrate someone that hates you. There is no logical explanation to integration. We can live happily from different places and still collaborate for the well-being of everybody and the well-being of the entire whole. From, you can be in Europe, you can be wherever in Asia, let me be in Africa. Can we all coordinate for the well-being of the whole continent or the whole country or the world?
So how do we then, because life has evolved, times have changed, the whole world in South Africa. So are you saying that we should have Oranias?
No.
What are you saying?
Is there an Orania in Europe that belongs to Africa? There's no Orania. There's no specific one spot in Europe that belongs to Africans only. We are in 2024. The black child must be at the core of all policies. A black child cannot, in the Constitution, speaks about giving an African child basic education. For as long as, I'm not sure what chapter in the Constitution speaks about basic education, a black child will be a spectator. They will never play tennis. They will never play hockey. They will never play water polo because it's not a need for them. They need to have soccer, netball, athletics, and it's ring-fenced. That is how far you go, and you can't go beyond. Yeah. So we can't have a government that is at peace with classifying academic for a black child at a basic level. You're making me functional. You're not making me mentally awakened. An education that is factual, that speaks about your own heroes that were killed by the system that is producing the books. You need to change the education of a black child. Remove religion from a black child and wake the black child up. Life can change, things have evolved. Everybody in South Africa, know yourself, your essence of being as a black person. And you start with education. Emptying the mind of indoctrination, relearning all things that have been taught, that were not taught in schools. So the black government owes the black child that much to free the black child from believing that if I'm passing 30%, I'm functioning. I'm meant to be a citizen of a country. You're going to be enslaved by the Chinese. You're going to be enslaved without chains. You're not preparing a black child to be a master of their own destiny with the education that they're currently getting at government schools because it's basic.
You said something earlier on about that there's so much that governance and government can learn from African leadership and how we do things. And it's so fascinating because when you watch the politicians out in parliament and stuff, they always talk about the Leninist and the Marxist and the Fanonian and all these ideologies that are anything but...
They don't produce results for a black child.
And also, why don't they speak about the system of Ubuntu? Why is it not trending that?
We have changed the way we look at Ubuntu. I can be graceful with Umlungu, but I'll be aggressive with you. I can take care of you as long as I'm not disturbing the white equation. Ubuntu bami buqala kumlungu. By the time kufika kwenu umuntu omnyama wasekhaya abusekho. So we are sisontekile in how we look at life. If charity cannot begin at home with me and you and her, we've lost it. Ubuntu buqala do I have on my table is the domestic native cared for from education, extramurals, activities. We can't just have alcohol as a go-to for Africans. We cannot have kids believing that being a mother at an early age is my way out. I have a talking point, or I have a commonality with you because we're both 18 and having kids, or 3 kids from different men. That cannot be a common factor for us as Africans. Change the education system, change the books, teach history, the true history, teach medicine as it was taught, teach kids that the first black man was the greatest, Imhotep, multiple genius. If ever there was anyone with autism, that would have been the first classified or diagnosed person with autism as Imhotep. Remove white names in the books. Put the proper people who did things in the world. Teach the black child who they are. Teach them about self-love. And you cannot self-love if you don't have a connection to your ancestors, to your gifts and spirituality. Teach, don't indoctrinate.
Parents are always wondering though, Guti, how? What's the how, you know? Because they are aware, you know, of what's happening to their children, but I don't think they've got the tools, or how do we make African consciousness and education accessible?
I think we have varying people in different places who have been awakened, who can come up with cartoons that incorporate our struggle heroes, who can teach about how does the sun move around, what does it teach you when it's moving around, the moon, the soil, the sand, what must be planted in April, in spring. Make life become practical, make education something that a child can relate to. This soil I resemble. From this soil, if I plant this bean, it's going to give me 10 more. And the next more, you keep investing on. If I have a crop, I can save for the next season and still plant, and it becomes rotational, it becomes generational, it becomes ongoing, and it's beautiful. You can't teach a child that there's no relationship that you have with the sand and the soil. We need to go back to teaching about how are we aligned to nature. Who are we in relationship to nature? What has nature taught us about ourselves? Who are we with Umvelinqaki, Uqamatha? So our education needs to start at spirituality more than anything.
What are our systems?
It's as if we never had systems as Africans. We were just waiting for Europeans to come and civilize us, which was never the case. They came to Africa to learn. They came to be breastfed, and the milk was too much for them. They wanted the motherland. And they destroyed everything that was good. They destroyed the calendar. They destroyed our way of life. They destroyed how we related to each other. The roles we had with nature and to each other as woman to woman, woman to man. The beliefs of polygamy that one man, like in nature, can have 2 women or 3 women or 4 wives, that was our way of life. Women were happy. Religion came, said monogamy, destroyed functioning, healthy, life-giving principles of life. In Africa, back in the day, there was no child without a family. Every child belonged. It took a village. That village was in the polygamy. Every mother knew that a child must be loved, regardless of the womb that brought it to life. They destroyed our way of life and our inability to understand the beauty of those days. We have embraced the monogamy thing as if it's the only possible way of living, and it was never like that. If you want to be monogamy, by all means, allow polygamy to thrive. And right now we can't thrive because black men don't have money. Black men don't have cows. And black men by nature, or men by nature, have never been monogamous. They've always been polygamous, as in nature. So religion imposes something that is not ever going to work for life. Remove the systems that came with the oppressors. Sit down with people who understand the culture. We are in 2024, there's technology, things have changed. We come from Asians who were ahead of everybody. Africans were never behind. No one today can explain how the pyramids were aligned. Nowhere in the world, in the soil of the world, can you find that intelligence. So our Asians were ahead. They left us with everything that we need to go back to and rebuild and continue 2024 going forward with the intelligence and the beauty of life of an African without the influences of Arabs and Muslims, and Arabs and whites. Those are the things we need to go back to. How we related to each other, the kindness we had, the respect we had for each other, the honor we had for nature. So we need to go back to those systems.
I think we all are wondering what are the African systems, you know? We need to sit down and unpack.
September is a new month. The sun determines what must be in the plant, in which season. We don't need to go back. We have nature as a gauger of processes and systems. Everything runs according to the cycle of the sun. We are sun people. We know that in quarter one, September to December, we must be doing the following. It's what season, the months speak to the actions and the correspondence with nature. We already have that. We don't need to go back and redraw. We already have that. It's the willingness of a black mind to say to self, I'm tired of using words by my oppressor. I'm oppressing myself by not going back to my way of life. Start with self.
Yeah, so the African systems like the African calendar.
Yes.
So if you can start there and start understanding.
And start reading, start unlearning, start being curious to understand how did I end up with an English name? Why was it necessary for me to have Stella, not Kanyezi? Who my parents were trying to make life easy for by giving me the name Stella. And how did they also have the English names? And we go back to say, the trauma of a black person has not been quantified, studied. We don't discuss the issues of trauma amongst ourselves as Africans. That when you're removed from your core self, that one thing is traumatic. And it's maintained by generations till the trauma becomes a personality. It becomes Africans are lazy, Africans are violent. How did Africans become violent? What activated them to become violent? Can we go back to the root causes of all the problems facing the black race?
When you say the trauma becomes a personality, the way we're drinking and taking substances.
And who is manufacturing the substances as well? You traumatize me and you give me the substances to further damage myself and the black community. We don't step back and say, how many years has a black person been under the oppressive rules and oppressive systems? A black person should be traumatized. A black person should be behaving the way they're behaving with all the traumas that generation to generation they've been accumulating, and there hasn't been a pause to say stop. When we move you from your core spiritual identity to being a Christian, I'm cutting you from your core. And that cut is traumatic because I am making you a mental slave. You can be breathing, living, but you do not know who you are. And that's a trauma. And you don't call them traumas. And when you look at universities that are passing students for psychology, it's not therapy at your core. You're depressed, what's depressing you? We look at medicating, and the medication have side effects. We keep bringing more problems to the table and saying, remove, we sober up. What happened to us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have any questions?
I was actually going to ask, like, in terms of the education being spread around, with like this channel, the majority of the people who are watching are likely also like people who speak English and who can understand basically everything that's being spoken about. But my question is like, for the people who actually need to know the information, because you spoke about like people having children, and those are the communities that should actually be reached out to the most. But then the problem is like the proper access to that information. So like what would be the best way? Obviously like probably through like language and like different modes of technology. Is it like having to go there physically? Because the way I see it is that there won't be that much change if we're only speaking to our community alone, like for us to understand just alone, this group of people like myself and my age group and people from the north or whatever. So that's what I want to understand, how we can spread it properly to the masses of people who we're actually speaking about.
Masses, we have media. TV plays a massive role. TV messed up a lot of black people. In the 80s, I think it's Dr. Asa Hilgard. He speaks about the side effects of media and the images it has on black minds. Majority of our programs about guns, witchcraft, there is nothing that is transformative. Start with TV, the media. Create content that hits here. That doesn't say you must drink, must think. Create content that's gonna make a black person uncomfortable to look at themselves as a Christian.
But the problem with that is that...
We don't have money at the same time to create the content.
And the platforms are owned by Abelum.
Yes.
And they don't want that type of content that's going to liberate abantu abamnyama. That's why you would have Moya Love promoted and given a platform. Because we do have a black channel. I mean, there it is. But why is it not giving us that content, this content that we talk about?
It does not serve the white structure to have content that speaks about you were indoctrinated to a point where you do not know who you are. It's going to take money from viewership. And we don't have Africans who are keen to unlearn. The educated don't want to unlearn. And if I am educated, I believe the system is serving me, and my kids are also being served by the system, they will never watch what I'm saying, because to them, I'm hateful, I'm anti-religion, I'm anti-Christ, I'm anti-white supremacy, I'm anti the Arabic slave trade, and those are facts. We are where we are because we don't have money. So if African people, truly speaking, we have the power in numbers. We don't have strength in the numbers of people who are learning. So we are outnumbered in being ahead because the masses are, all is good. They're lazy, they're failing, they don't want to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. What steps do they have to pull them up? And they don't have the boots in the first place. We don't like the truth as Africans at the same time. We can literally say, no more TV, we can now focus on Ntsik's show. No more TV. No more, I don't watch TV. So I watch her shows.
That would be so hardcore.
So can we take the accountability as Africans as well? What are we feeding ourselves? What are we watching that is influencing our minds? If I used to love, 2022, I was at home babysitting. I was watching TV and thinking, okay, there's handsome men. What was the show with the brothers, the Zulu brothers?
Oh my word, I also don't watch TV, yes?
Yeah, there was a program with Zulu brothers. And I love the names, like Nkosana. The names were phenomenal. Usbani. Start small things, like change the names. Start venerating our kings. Start giving names, kings that were killed, and we do not know where they are skulls today. Start small. Anyone, Ntsiki becomes a revolutionary in her work. She's planting seeds in all her shows of, Dr. Mthetwa was speaking about the Zulu history of Shaka and the Mthetwa family. I was like, damn, she brought someone who is a historian, who will bring black men pride. We need those kind of people to be emulated, who speak the truth, who have studied both the Western education and have set themselves down to say, something is missing in this education. There's a miss, there's facts that are not here. I will take the time to go read. They should be going to schools in locations. We need to go back to going back to schools and say, Bantabamyam, le mfundo enifundayo akuyona imfundo. Infundisa ukungacabangi, niyicabangela ukuthi ngubani. Niyamazi lo bhuti lo. Ubani kunina. If we need to have bracelets with people's names and faces to say, these are my heroes, I must never forget them. Let's start there. Go to schools. Do speeches in vernacular. I'll fail there though. I'll fail. This money, I'll fail. Oh, I'm autistic. So in standard 1, 41 years ago, my teacher wrote that I was struggling with reading isiZulu. Standard 2, I failed. I couldn't read, write, spell. I have a speech impairment. I changed schools in standard 6, failed again because Afrikaans. How many kids are autistic, never diagnosed, given names that by Domu, short or slow learners? Yes, we're slow learners because I learn better with repetition. I can't read at 49, this is Zulu, but I can, if I must calm myself, say, I must be counting words. So my vernacular is eaten up because I didn't have therapies in primary school to help me understand why are you failing, why are you not able to read properly, why are you struggling with reading and speaking. Those therapies were not there.
Being a special child.
Yes. And we didn't call those things back then. We just wisdom we are fail. Wisdom we are fail. Like, like autism in the Black, it's new, it's not well understood, it's not one size fits all. My traits are different to yours, different to yours. Autism, it's a different, well, it's a disability. It's different.
No, but I think in our culture, you would have been just a gifted child. They would have, in ancient Africa, you would have, just like how the queer community was also treated like they were gifted. So
we need to have conversation that how in the past, like in my case, I was sick as a child. I needed to see a traditional healer.
Yes.
So ubaba was like, kukhona into engekho right now lengane iyagula idinga isangoma gala. So he knew ukuthi kukhona ama signs ayikho right ngami kumele ngidinga isangoma sizongilapha. Hence today as well.
Exactly.
Yes. So sidinga abantu to educate ngesintu.
But do you feel like education won't be enough at some point? Because from everyone, I hear the similar views in that we just need to be educated. But do you think at some point, like, what is the action that needs to happen after this education? Let's say
we are domestic natives, are tribalistic, right? In schools, you have, in Durban, I'm from Durban, sifunda isiZulu kuphela eThekwini, isiZulu. How about you introduce Xhosa, all the other official languages, and you start having debates, kids in Joburg debating with kids in Durban. Like literal.
Yeah.
Start educating, but change the education. Don't maintain what we studied because it didn't benefit us. It didn't produce Black conscious individuals. It produced functioning beings who can work but not question. Start with eskoleni. eThekwini, there should be classes as a Sotho vendor. You can't come to Joburg in your EduJ. First time you are coming across a new language. Your whole 15 years, awazi lutho ukuthi what is Moroto, isinkwa, isonka. We should be having books ukuthi isinkwa in Zulu, in Xhosa, so that it becomes easier for the next generation. We have solutions in South Africa, just the political willpower that does not benefit the masses.
So the masses must go march, like we've marched back in the past.
The masses, the thing with indoctrination and Black Africa not being given the right education, it kills your will to resist. You just take it as, this is my lot, Akukho kunye, ukhulumela uhulumeni, uthe uhulumeni, I'm going to be in a class with 45 other black kids. And my mother's going to be a helper, unemployed, poverty. This is a black person's lot. And the world, and South Africa is rich. So it's a mindset change that is required. Why in 2024 do we still need to queue for a driver's license when the Department of Home Affairs can sit with other methods and say, we are increasing our efficiency. One picture ID can circulate all licensing departments. How come a black government cannot serve black kids and go to schools for IDs? Why must a black child sacrifice school to go out life on ID where they can say on Saturdays we have a program, everybody, parents must be there together on a Saturday. We will go to the locations, use all government utilities in that location to make sure that a black child is in school every day. And if Stella is performing well in accounting or in maths, how can I explain it in Zulu? In accounting in Zulu so that you can understand better? How come you cannot teach me in my vernacular language so I can understand and pass better? So it's education. Different education though. Not the miseducation, proper education.
Thank you so much, Gogo Stella.
Thank you as well, Gogo. I give thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
Thank you so much for joining this episode, guys. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And remember that how we earn is when you guys watch the adverts. Thank you again. See you again next time.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into e off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.